Mr. Su, as you have listened very carefully to the speech delivered by Chinese President Xi Jinping, he quoted Victor Hugo, of course, a French writer, on the right occasion in Paris. He talked about extreme resources coming from extreme resolutions. How much do you think those resolutions will come true this time at the Paris conference?
It's winter in Paris now, but we feel like in spring. That is because President Xi's speech brings spring to this winter Paris. If winter comes, is spring far away? And I think that's a very important message from President Xi's speech today. And it's not only bring to Paris the necessary resources and resolution, but what is most important to bring much confidence and also determination to the negotiations process here in Paris. I'm sure that with the political will and political momentum that created by the participation of the world leaders, I'm sure that the successful Paris outcome is within reach.
But Mr. Su, you know this better than I do. You have been the chief negotiator representing China in the climate change deals for quite some time. Words are words, yet actions could be actions. They are quite different. The leaders have been very talkative and rhetoric in their speeches, but what about the real actions? One question, Mr. Su. Common but differentiated responsibilities between developed economies and the developing economy. This time we see huge difference once again, Mr. Su.
Yes, this is a very important question, that how we're going to translate the words and pledges into actions and deed, as already said by the Secretary General of the United Nations at the Paris conference. I think one of the very important things to do here in Paris is how we are going to reflect the differentiation between developing countries. It's very clear that the developed country parties has to take the lead in terms of reducing their excessive emissions of greenhouse gases, and at the same time to provide the real financial support and technology capacity building support to developing countries. And also, on the other hand, developing countries would join the international cooperation efforts and try to take enhanced both mitigation and adaptation actions, and ranging from the energy efficiency and development of non-fossil fuel, and also to further promote their cooperations among developing countries themselves. That is South-South cooperation.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Su, you also heard from the Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech. He called on developed economies to keep on contributing to the Green Fund, which the developed economy has long pledged $100 billion every year, and yet we see it has been short of funds from the very beginning. The developed economies, without implementing their promises, how much will that influence the determination and actions coming from developing countries, including China?
I think if the developed countries fail to honor their commitments to mobilize $100 billion per year by 2020, that would create a huge credibility problem in this process, and also that would have negative impacts on the negotiations here. I think really that we have been trying very hard that for developed country parties to honor their commitments under the convention. For the pre-2020 period, they need to mobilize $100 billion per year, and also for the post-2020 period, they also continue to mobilize the necessary financial resources, as pointed by the Secretary General, that $100 billion per year should using as a starting point.
But Mr. Su, others would argue, for example, during your negotiations with many of your international counterparts, that China, one of the developing countries certainly, and yet it is one of the biggest emitters in the world. So they would say, why don't you do something first and then we will follow suit, Mr. Su?
I think also that has been said by President Xi that we should try to avoid the zero-sum game and everybody should make their contributions to resolving the common challenge of climate change. And I think China's actions policies is not dependent whether developed countries would honor their commitments or not, but certainly if they could honor their commitments under the convention in terms of mitigation, adaptation, and provision of financial and technology support developing countries, that really helps to move the process forward to reach a comprehensive, ambitious, successful, legally binding outcome in Paris.
Those are beautiful adjectives, Mr. Su, you have just outlined, but we earlier was playing some of the footages coming from Beijing and Shanghai, major cities in China. On the one hand, China's CO2 likely to peak by the year 2030, also said by Chinese President Xi Jinping at his speech today. On the other hand, you see huge environmental problems facing China, this time with the fog being the biggest challenge. And today it's already reaching PM2.5, more than 500 extreme hazards for the health of the people. So how do you think China, as the chief negotiator, when you explain to the international counterparts, China is going to keep its balance? Can China speed up this process, Mr. Su?
I'm sure that China will speed its efforts to address both air pollution issues as well as the emissions of greenhouse gases. I think that those policies and actions would have co-benefits. On the one hand, to resolving to mitigate the emissions of greenhouse gases, and on the other hand, try to mitigate the local air pollution. I think Chinese government is very much determined to pursue a path of environmental protection and sustainable development.
But Mr. Su, many would wonder, is that too little too late or too slow too late? Because people are fed up with the bad air, it seems, from time to time in major cities across China. And secondly, people say no matter how much effort is being made this time at the Paris conference, still 2 degrees is not likely to be reached at all.
I think the 2 degrees would sending out a very strong message to the world, world economy that would try to adapt the new challenges and try to set in a low carbon and sustainable development path, and also to build the necessary climate resilience in their economies. And I'm sure that the Chinese government would step up its efforts to address those environmental and as well as climate issues.
What do you mean by speeding up? Is there something specific and concrete you can give to us, Mr. Su?
I think it's for China we had been for a long time it's been take the climate issues and environment issues very seriously, and also given the current status of very heavy air pollution and the very serious environmental problems, in order to provide the beautiful environment and clean air to the people, we need to step up efforts to do real actions.
At today's opening of the Paris conference, the Chinese President Xi Jinping in his speech also talked about the quality of international governance. He said the climate change summit this time and the conference in Paris could be a mirror reflecting the level of international governance. What do you think is the degree now we have in terms of our sophistication of international governance, particularly on the climate change issue? You know this better than I do, and I met you many times at climate conferences around the world over the past 1 decade. It seems extremely, extremely difficult. So the question is, Mr. Su, is the international system and the governing system that we have now really fit with the demands of the public? You see the demonstrations around the world for this.
Yes, I think that we also need to enhance actions in order to produce the good outcome. And I think the very wisdom by the president on the global governance, using the global climate governance as a mirror, that the message is very clear. All countries in the world need to take actions in order to meet the challenge in accordance with their respective capabilities, their historical responsibilities, and their level of development, and to do their utmost efforts to cooperate, to engage in cooperation to address the common challenge.
We have seen the world leaders already made their pledge, at least when it comes to degree of determination, but then it has to be followed up by the negotiations, in fact, operated by you and many of your international counterparts. What does the pledges made by the world leaders this time at the opening ceremony for the conference mean for negotiators like you in the negotiation rooms in the next few days to come, Mr. Su?
I think the political momentum is still there, and I think the negotiators would got that message. They would trying very hard, try to narrow down their differences, try to come up with a good solution to the Paris Agreement.
How much compromise can China make? I mean, when I'm asking this question to a negotiator, it's almost impossible to get an answer. But the question is, many are suspecting whether this conference could be a success and what role China would play. Some say it's likely to be 50-50 when it comes to successful rate. And China, even though positive at the very beginning, how much can China do alone while others do not take action? That's a big question mark. Mr. Su, your input here.
Actually, China cannot resolve the global climate issue by itself. But I'm more on the optimistic side than 50-50 chance of success in Paris. I have a full confidence that we're going to produce a very successful outcome in the end. Although it's not easy process, we need to work very hard, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, I know your schedule is like that, so 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the next 2 weeks. Before we go, very important question for you. What do you perceive as the biggest challenges when you are participating in the next round, days and nights, negotiations in Paris?
I don't know. It's really, we have very big problem of time constraint, and that's why I'm calling for 24 hours and 7 days a week. Really, it's not easy just simply translate the political will of the leaders into the text of the final agreement. But we would be trying very hard, try to accommodate each other's concerns and try to come up with the common ground, while that there's still, Paris is not the end of the game. It's a new starting point, and we can also try to further continue to be engaged with each other, try to find the necessary solutions to the technical and procedural matters.